2024 was the hottest year on record for our planet, and climate scientists around the globe are united that more action must be taken to stave off dire effects from climate change. Congress mandates a report roughly every 5 years that's supposed to track the planet's progress, called the National Climate Assessment. This week, the Trump administration dismissed all the authors working on the report that was set to be released in 2028. Joining us now is one of those authors, Tulane professor Jesse Keenan. Thank you so much for your time, Professor. What's the practical importance of this report?
Well, the assessment, the National Climate Assessment, is a review of the best available science that we have about the impacts of climate change and what we can do to both mitigate and adapt. That is how we can prevent greenhouse gases and ultimately what we do to prepare and respond to climate impacts. And the assessment itself is widely utilized in the public and the private sector for both functions. And this relates to how turning on the lights, safe drinking water, everything that we think about in terms of our daily lives that may be impacted by climate change is supported by this science and this assessment of the science.
What happens now that you've been dismissed from your role along with hundreds of your colleagues?
Well, that's up to the administration in terms of how they proceed, and I can't speak to that. What I can speak to is an active body of work that goes on in academia and as well as in the private sector, as well as state and local governments. So the work continues because the risks are real, and so you can avoid something and you can deny it, but at the end of the day, these are real impacts that shape people's lives, and both the public and the private sector are actively engaged in a wide variety of fronts to understand what climate impacts and climate science and how it's impacting our daily lives.
We see in our reporting day to day around the world, whether it's dust storms or massive flooding or the melting of glaciers, is there a direct correlation with climate change?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've seen in prior assessments is that the attribution, the formal attribution of climate change to extreme events is growing. And the scientific literature is increasingly clear that many, if not most, extreme events and disasters have some attribution to climate. It isn't necessarily that climate is driving those, but is playing some increasing the likelihood, rather, of these extreme events from happening. So we do know with greater and greater precision the attribution associated between climate change and all of these extreme events.
There are those who also say that the Earth goes through different cycles of change over decades, over centuries. Can you give us a best case scenario and a worst case scenario with regard to the impact of climate change on our world?
It's hard to understand where we are going, and there's a great deal of uncertainty, of course, but that shouldn't prevent us from engaging the science to understand with a better idea of where we're going. And the best way to think about this is without a national climate assessment, we're driving in a car in a rainstorm without windshield wipers. And our goal is to provide the best available science so that we can make better decisions in the future.
Before we let you go, do you think that the Trump administration is making an irreversible mistake?
Well, we've seen with prior administrations, and it's not my role to speak to the public policy or political implications of this, but what I can say is that prior administrations, including the Bush administration, had reluctance in issuing and moving forward the National Climate Assessment, but were ultimately prevailed. And they did so because it is an obligation under the law. So as long as this country is advanced and governed pursuant to the law, then we should adhere to Congress's original intent, a bipartisan passed bill in 1990, the Global Change Act, to produce the National Climate Assessment in the advance of the stewardship of our country.
Jesse Keenan, we thank you so much for your insight and appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.